One curious little bit of Austrian economics is Rothbard's understanding of monopoly. Now, there's a lot of confusion surrounding the situation because Rothbard says monopoly price can exist, but monopolies can't exist in real capitalism. See, the problem is it gets very convoluted because he's essentially redefining what monopoly is. A monopoly price can exist, but actual monopoly can't, and that when this monopoly does happen in a truly free market, not only can it happen, but that it should also be defended. So far what we have established is that there's nothing wrong with monopoly price, either when instituted by one firm or by cartel, that, in fact, whatever price the free market unhampered by violence or the threat of violence establishes will be the best price. Exactly how does Rothbard explain the price being set by the market when there's a monopoly? If there's one producer, that producer becomes the price setter. So how can he claim it's the market when there's one person doing it? Clearly the consumer doesn't have the control, that control supposedly being choice. There is no choice. There's only one producer. Essentially he's saying that it's the market doing it even though there's one person setting the price. This literally makes no sense, and he's completely refuted himself. Later, we're going to learn that what he means is as long as it's not the government doing it. In other words, if the free market does the exact same thing as what the government does, it doesn't count, and it's only bad when the state does it. L.E. Hill showed that Rothbard had a complete double standard when it came to monopoly, but he also felt that it was very important to look at his ideas of monopoly inside the context of Austrian economics. Since Rothbard's economic theories are generally within the Austrian economic tradition, it might be useful to compare his position on monopoly to those of Ludwig von Mises, Israel, and Kirzner. Mises held that monopoly could exist in a free market whenever the supply of a commodity was controlled by one seller or a group of sellers acting in concert. Such a situation was not necessarily harmful unless the demand curve for the commodity was inelastic. Then, according to Mises, the monopolist would have a perverse incentive to restrict production and create a monopoly price, and that price would be an infringement on the supremacy of the consumers and the democracy of market. Kirzner suggested that the monopoly ownership of some resource could have harmful effects, since it would create an incentive on the part of the resource owner to not employ the resource to the fullest extent capable with the pattern of consumer taste in the market. Rothbard is simply rejecting the definition of monopoly as a complete control of the supply of a commodity. He's also basically saying that there's no difference between the market setting a price and a single producer with the power to determine that price. In other words, he's essentially saying the same thing. Now, do you see a trend in Austrian economics here? Just keep redefining things until they work out the way that you want them to. For Rothbard, in man, economy, and state, he literally makes no distinction between a small producer and a large firm that holds even a majority chunk of the productive forces in a single sector. To him, they are literally the same thing and have the same power in the marketplace. This is essentially, in a manner of speaking, literally saying that a small mom-and-pop organization has the same market power as Walmart. We now come to the center of Rothbard's argument on monopoly. It is something only the government can grant. Only the government granting the specific exclusive right to produce something is a monopoly. Which means if literally the same thing happens through the market, which he acknowledges can happen and is likely to happen, it doesn't count. In other words, once again, he's literally just redefined monopoly to be the state. He's admitting that the exact same thing can happen in the market, but that's okay. But it's not okay when the state does it, because of some lofty notion that the market still determines the price, even though that it's literally a monopoly. This makes absolutely no sense. If we were to follow this exact same logic for anarcho-capitalists, the Austrian economics, we could therefore take the phrase that they commonly use, guns don't kill people, the state does. We could then say as long as the state ceases to exist, killing ceases to exist. Because that's their same train of logic. Of course, this makes absolutely no sense. Guns don't kill people, people kill people, and that's the truth. I'm just giving an example of what kind of logic Austrians actually use. Just redefine killing as something that the state does. In another place, he says free markets are better because the consumers can set the prices. On the free market, consumers can dictate the pricing and thereby assure the best allocation of productive resources to supply their wants. In a government enterprise, this cannot be done. However, he admits that monopolies still form in a free market, which would mean that the consumer is not actually setting the price, which would be tantamount to saying the market did not allocate resources rationally. The monopoly, in fact, did so, because a monopoly is a natural thing that happens in the market, and it's not wrong for the previous reasons that he gave. He's essentially saying the market is not right. The monopoly is actually the correct allocation of resources, because his logic is so convoluted and contradicting. He's being completely inconsistent here. In empirical reality, companies put out literature in support of stable prices. They don't want them to fluctuate because it makes production more difficult to plan for, and it can create a counterproductive price competition scenarios. The fact is, companies have an incentive to want and push for stable prices in the market, which is something that Austrians just completely ignore. They just don't take this into account when thinking about monopoly. However, let's take this criticism of Rothbard even further. He said the market tends towards equilibrium, if not outright reach equilibrium. Rothbard presumed that in individual markets the law of one price dominated, and that market clearing happened rapidly and smoothly. Just as in conventional neoclassical economics, general equilibrium, the evenly rotating economy, was the direction in which the economy was headed. The pervasiveness of change made it unlikely that the economy would ever achieve the ERE. But, nevertheless, like a dog chasing a mechanical rabbit, it at least could explain the direction of change. Although Rothbard warned against taking equilibrium too seriously, given the world of constant change in which we live, it was nevertheless his underlying assumption that markets adjust quickly to new equilibrium positions. Indeed, his justification for the basic efficiency of markets was that entrepreneurs will be very quick to leave the loosening industry when mistakes are made. According to Austrians, one of the benefits of the truly free market is the flexibility in price, yet they admit monopolies will form, and these monopolies will help prevent a flexibility in price. In addition, anarcho-capitalists literally have no explanation as to how coercive monopolies would not form in their truly free market scenario. The truth is that a truly free market would degenerate into a monopoly very quickly. This monopoly would then be able to own all the private protection firms or privatized police. It wouldn't take very long before they started using this power to maintain their position in wealth. To claim that they wouldn't is essentially to go completely against their belief on human nature, and it would also go completely against their profit motive. The fact is, with this, it's very clear how one gigantic monopoly or several large ones would form out of the market naturally. Thus, we would end up in what could be described as a feudal type situation, where these very large companies would hold all this power, and they would essentially end up as feudal lords because they controlled all the coercive mechanisms as well. They have no explanation as to why or how this wouldn't happen. They just simply declare that it wouldn't, which seems to suggest they would go completely against human nature, which they claim is set in stone and can't change, and would then also go against their profit motive. These monopolies and their control over force, in other words, a almost monopoly on force as well, would lead us right back to a de facto state, the very thing anarcho-capitalists are supposed to be against. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. While you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.